Hey everyone, David Morris here, publisher for Lake Drive Books. And we are a publishing house that publishes books that help you heal, grow, and discover. And I am here today with author Matt Kendziera, who is publishing a book called Bring It Home, The Adventure of Finding Yourself After Being Lost in Religion. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thanks for having me. And it was fun even to hear you say that you have author Matt Kendziera on the show, because that's something I've always wanted somebody to say, and it just happened right there. So you're just making dreams come true.
There you go. You are authorized and you are an author.
I like it. I like it.
And you've written a great book.
Thank you.
It's a very engaging book. It just pulls you in. You have a very smooth delivery in your writing. And you end each chapter, each chapter has a story. There's humor, there's interest, there's a sense of growing up, almost in a Stand By Me kind of way. And then there's like this takeaway at the end that you call Bring It Home.
Yeah.
I remember I was looking at something you were writing about the book, and you've been working on this for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've always had this deep connection to kind of my roots, I guess. How I grew up has always meant a lot to me. And so I've always wanted to write a book about that, but I didn't always know how it was going to happen. And so I think probably the first time I ever sat down to start writing this book was probably, if I were to guess, I would say 15 years ago, was probably when I sat down and wrote chapters for the first time. And I probably started and stopped 6 or 7 times over those 15 years, because, you get a little ways into it and you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this, or it doesn't seem like it's working, or nobody's going to read this anyway, so why am I wasting my time? And so it's pretty surreal that we're having this conversation and that we're at this point where the book is coming out soon, because it's a dream I've had for a long time to write and to be an author. And this particular book is something I've had in my head and heart for a long time.
Well, you're also a person of many talents too. So I know you're a drummer.
Yeah, I grew
pastor,
up playing drums.
You've been a speaker.
Yeah.
An entertainer too, in some ways. Say more about, like, where did you want to get started in life? What did you thought you were going to be when you grew up, and how did we get all the way to a book?
Right. Well, I wanted to be a Catholic priest when I was in like 2nd grade. That's all I want. I saw this guy up front that everybody listened to, and he talked about God, and it seemed amazing, and he didn't have to get married. So that was awesome, because as a 2nd grader, you have no interest in girls. So I used to like get my parents' Nilla wafers out of the cupboard, and my dad's robe, and you remember those little record players that would play like Camptown Races? They're plastic. Mm-hmm. And then I'd make my brother go outside with me, and I would just serve him communion. So like the first thing I ever wanted to be was the Catholic priest. And then I saw a drummer that just blew my mind. So then it went from being a Catholic priest to wanting to be a drummer. And that I poured tons of my life into, and actually ended up going to college for music. Met my wife in the music department. And then one day got asked to speak on worship at a church. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound that difficult. And so I did that, and it was really well received, so well received that within that year, I was traveling around to youth camps all over the place, speaking and things like that. And then the older
you're one of those few people that don't get like horrified at public speaking.
No, I feel more comfortable doing that than almost anything else.
Most of us are like, oh, that sounds horrible. But
yeah,
for you,
it's weird, because I have I have a little bit of social anxiety. So if I walk into a room of like 10 people, I'm nervous as can be. But if I walk into a room full of hundreds that I know that I have a microphone, I feel right at home. So, and then, that led to being a prison chaplain for a number of years, pastoring a small community that was geared towards the marginalized in our community for a number of years. My wife and I doing music ministry and doing independent music things as well. So I've done a lot of different things, but they've all been geared around either music, speaking, and faith has always been a big component of that as well.
And you have a podcast called Chasing Goodness. What does that mean? What's that about?
Yeah, I just feel like religion over the history of the world has not been defined as good for a lot of it. And a lot of what I experienced in religious settings, I would not describe as good, although there certainly has been a lot about it that has been good. And so I'm really inspired by people who are led by their faith to do good work in this world, whether that's justice oriented work or just community building work. And I'm an Enneagram 7, and so I'm always looking for the next best thing in life. And so I like just chasing around goodness. And so I thought we'll call it chasing goodness. And a lot of times I'll just share on that podcast, but a lot of times I'll have great people all really from all over the country, all over the world, just doing some beautiful work, and all of that inspired by their faith.
Yeah. So your book is called Bring It Home: The Adventure of Finding Yourself After Being Lost in Religion. How did you get lost in religion? What was that? What was your experience of that?
Well, for me, I think I so desperately wanted to be successful, first as a musician and then as a speaker, faith professional, whatever you want to call it. And I think because I wanted some of those things so desperately, I was willing to kind of give up myself and allow people to kind of define who I was or what I was supposed to believe. And there's some things like deep inside of me that I've always believed, such as that Jesus is for everyone. I've always struggled with the idea of heaven and hell. I always really struggle with this thought that if you're not straight, then you're not okay. You know, some of those thoughts like from way back when, because I'm a music guy and my wife's a theater woman. So like, you know, we didn't grow up being around a bunch of straight people all the time. Like we grew up in very diverse atmospheres because of music and theater. And so, you know, I got lost in religion because I just kind of, I mean, for lack of better terms, kind of drank the Kool-Aid. Like these people who are the professionals who are above me in the hierarchy are telling me what to believe, and I like them and I'm inspired by them. So then I should believe like they believe, and felt like over time, people were telling me that some of my thoughts and some of my beliefs were not valid and I needed to change them to be accepted. And then slowly over time, I started just speaking what I believed to be, you know, the questions, the doubts, the thoughts that I had in my mind, and nobody wanted to hear them. And then eventually got to a place where I started speaking louder about those things, and then found myself on the outside of those church communities that I used to call my family. And when I found I mean, I can literally tell you, it was this moment when I got kicked out of the church that I started for poor and homeless people because of the way that I thought. And I'll never forget this moment. I was sitting at a coffee shop on Indeed.com trying to figure out how I was going to, you know, keep a roof over my family's head. But then also had this realization that, hey, this is the first time that I can actually take this journey to explore what it is truly that I believe without everybody else's influence clouding that, or people telling me there's a right way or a wrong way to believe. And so, yeah, I mean, I got lost up in it because I became a professional within the context of it. And then that's a hard thing to do. It just is.
Yeah. So much of religion in the United States, at least, is about belief and it's about theology. And that's just one dimension of it. But somehow people get this idea that it's got to be a certain way. And if it's not, it dictates every other dimension.
Yeah.
And not see the interplay that goes on there.
Yeah.
And when one dimension is sort of in charge of all the others, something breaks down, something goes wrong. But that's kind of the culture that we're in. And I think more and more people are trying to find their way out. They got lost and they're trying to find their way forward. And you sort of try to come up with a solution for that by saying, bring it home. You tell stories, not just to talk about yourself, although that must have been therapeutic, because it always is for every author.
At some level, yeah.
Yeah. But you tell stories to show folks that there is something innate about you and even your past experience and your present that has a sense of spirit to it, has a sense of connection to it. I'm not doing a very good job. You're
right on. It's this thought of, so I was told so much of what I was supposed to believe, but then when I stepped back from that, I realized that every day of my life in some way, shape, or form has been a spiritual experience. And I can look back to the early, again, that Catholic story of me wanting to be a priest and serving my brother communion. Like there was something spiritual to that I was trying to wrap my mind around God. I can remember sitting out in the woods, contemplating how the stars exist and things like that. And so I believe that there's more value from a standpoint of faith and belief in our own stories than maybe there is from a person up front telling us how that should be laid out or how we should even interpret those stories. And so, yeah, everything from childhood up to, you know, raising kids and being married or working as a prison chaplain. I mean, life is filled with stories. And sometimes I think we take this standpoint of like, it's just me. So what does my story matter? Well, it matters a great deal to you, and it matters to those people around you. And I think it's a deep part of your connection to God. And bring it home is actually a music term. I was a jazz drumming is what I got really excited about and went to school for. And when everybody's improvising and, you know, gets away from kind of the main part of the tune, at some point somebody can just call out, bring it home. And that means you go back to the foundation of the tune, the part that everybody knows. And so bring it home is just this idea of, you know, let's go back to the foundation of who we are and our stories in our life. And let's find God there. Let's assume that he's been there all along, as opposed to assuming that he's, you know, in some sort of religious building or construct.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so rich, actually. It's sort of like, why do we make this so complicated?
Right. Yeah.
Why can't we just come back to like, why can't we remember? Why do we need to forget who we are?
Yeah.
There's a sort of leveling that goes on in maybe even particularly white American Christian culture, where we're all kind of like the same, and there's not a sense of variety.
Yes.
And you're just saying, get back to who you are, figure out what that is. And it's not always easy, because so many of us have moved around. We're not as connected as we used to be.
Right.
But
yeah, and that's the hard part, really, is that we're in this uncharted territory, it feels like. And I think we're all just trying to figure out where we go from here. So many of us were so connected to church communities, and now I haven't had a home church for years and years. And so I'm just learning new ways to have community, to express my faith. There's another piece of it too, that, you know, I love to have fun, and I love to laugh, and I love making other people laugh as well. And one of the things I realized as people have been going through what's commonly become known as kind of this deconstruction process in their lives, is it's hard, right? And it's daunting, and it's sad, and sometimes it's really deeply hurtful.
Yeah. And where do we go from here? Yeah.
Right. But I also think that life's too short to be too serious all the time. And so I think along this process, it's so important to laugh at our own stories or at our own experiences. And I remember, so I was at this church. It was the first time I ever shared the story publicly of getting kicked out of the church that I started. And I remember I shared it in front of a church community. And when I said the tagline, basically, which was, and then the people that I invited to be part of this church kicked me out of this thing that I started for poor and homeless people, they laughed. And I stood back, and at first I was kind of offended. I was like, that was like the most hurtful thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And then I stood back and I was like, you know what? That is so ridiculous that it's okay to laugh at it, you know? And so I think along this process, we need to not take ourselves too seriously all the time. And that's why you mentioned already, like, there's so many of the stories in the book are humorous as well, you know, because I just want us to be okay with laughter. I want us to be okay with the lighter side of life, as we, you know, and some of the stories are very daunting and hard as well. But, you know, I want there to be a balance.
What would be a story that you really like from the book, or that really stands out for you, that kind of helped you say, this is who I am. I'm Matt. This is something that shaped me, that I love about my who I am and my background or my present.
Yeah, I think, you know, honestly, some of my favorite stories are those stories like growing up, those childhood stories. And, you know, the two things I mentioned, I wanted to be a Catholic priest growing up. The other thing I thought I could be as a profession was a Native American. And so I wanted to be either a priest or a Native American. I didn't know that a Polish guy couldn't like change his ethnicity. I didn't know that was an option. So I was
and it's kind of problematic to talk to even, but as a kid, it sounds great. Yeah,
I was hell-bent on being a Native American. And I, you know, got like, I remember my dad was a hunter. So I took, you know, I grabbed one of his deer hides and made it into this whole wardrobe. And to me, the reason I mean, it's a funny story because kids' stories are always funny. But to me, if I look at those two things, like to me as a kid, being a Native American represented adventure, because that's what I would
Yeah.
see on TV at my grandpa's house, right? I would see these adventurous people who just were amazing, and they were so connected with nature. And so
Yeah.
that was something that I remember from as far back as I can go. And then this idea of wanting to be connected, as a grade school kid, like I loved going to Catholic church. I loved going to Catholic school. Most people hate that. And so looking back at my life and realizing, hey, these two things that when adults would ask me what I wanted to be for a living, and I'd say I either want to be a Native American or a priest, the priest is still within me because I still have this deep desire for spirituality. And I have this desire to help lead people in that on some level, not the way I used to, but, and then I still have this incredibly deep desire for adventure in life. And I believe that life should be an adventure, which is what the Native American and my childlike mind stood for. And so that's just one story that I always kind of lay as a foundation for a lot of the work that's in the book.
And you wanted something, I mean, what I see in those two things is something tangible,
Yes.
There's something tangible about the sacraments of Catholicism.
Yes.
And the liturgy.
Yeah, much so.
And then even with, the adventure that you saw in Native Americans growing up, there's the adventure itself is something tangible. It's something real to experience and hold on to.
Yeah.
Those are important things, and we can tend to lose touch with them in this world where we're watching Netflix or we're going to the same restaurant, Chili's over here and Chili's over there. And there's just not something unique and tangible about that all the time, or even sacred in a sense.
And there's sacredness in everything, I mean, there's a story in the book about me and a bunch of friends seeing how high we could pee on a wall, and find like some sort of spiritual understanding.
That's a chapter not to be missed.
Yes. There's a chapter of me trying to impress some girls and getting hung up by my crotch on a chain link fence, But then there's also stories about a prisoner who was beaten by his father his whole life, and the story of him forgiving his father. So there's that much variety.
And the work you did in the inner city church, and the challenge working with folks who have so many challenges in their lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot, the people that have read the book to this point, they've, one of the comments is, one chapter I'm laughing, the other chapter I'm wiping tears from my eyes. And I think it is a bit of a roller coaster. The story of my daughter coming out as being gay while being deeply attached to the evangelical church, and feeling like I had to protect her from these people that we called our family. It's just, there's a lot. Life is hard. It brings us joys and it brings us hardship, but through all of it, like there's a divine sense going on, right? There's divinity, there's God, there's spirit involved in all of it. And I think that's my hope as people read it, that it's not necessarily that here we are in this part of history trying to find the next way to do church right, or find the next better theology,
Right.
It's more just, again, bringing it home, coming back to ourselves and realizing much of what we're looking for, we already have.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I've heard people say that in this deconstruction journey, for example, they realize, oh, I exist. Hello, me.
Right.
And I think that's what your book is trying to do is to get people in that mindset of remembering who they are and what does that look like, and
there's freedom in that.
Freedom, preferences, uniqueness. We don't all need to conform to a certain mold, and for some reason that's what has been encouraged in recent history. So
I think it's because that's how control can be granted or created.
Well, very excited for you and your book.
So excited to be partnering with you in this journey, and thanks for believing in me and this project enough to get behind it. And I mean, it's a dream come true working for you as well, and working with you. And I'm so excited about Lake Drive, and it's been fun to meet all these other authors out there, doing the same thing that I'm doing, and see so many of us that believe in these projects that are deep within us. And then to have somebody like yourself believe in all of us enough to,
Thank you.
to recreate your own career and get behind these projects and put out an incredible project yourself. So
thank you. Yeah, it's a interesting time where we can find these new ways of doing things, and we've got a fun little thing going on, and interesting dynamic. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, well, I was talking to, I won't even say their names, but behind the scenes with some of the Lake Drive authors, and we believe that we're on top of a rocket here, David. We believe that we're all a part of something special, and so we don't take that for granted because of your spirit and your desire and your belief to get behind projects like ours. That we're pretty, the people that I've been talking to that are part of your team, this Lake Drive team, like we're pretty proud of this little crew we have.
Oh, that's so awesome. I'm going to excerpt this part and just post.
You should. And when you're having a bad day, just like have it on repeat.
I need that sometimes. Absolutely. So, all right. So people can find you at Chasing Goodness Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yep, you can find me online just at my website, which is mattkendziera.com. And Kendziera is a hard one to spell, but you'll find it if you try.
Yeah.
And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well, just under Matt Kendziera on Facebook. You can also find Chasing Good as well.
We'll put all the links in the notes to this video. And thank you so much. And wishing you well with your book. It's going to be it's going to be a great ride. Books hang around for a while, so
I hear.
And they can take on a life of their own too. So just enjoy that.
I hope it does.
Okay. Take care for now.
Thanks, David.